Well, good day to you. It is December the 11th, 2020, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you happen to be. Now, if this is your first time ever listening to Search for Signs, I do want to thank you and welcome you. We have over 300 videos where we talk about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. Through the course of these videos, we take a deeper look at who and what Maitreya is, and why is he and his masters returning now to the everyday world, and, of course, what does it mean for you? We take a deeper look at the miracle signs that have been going on for decades in all walks of life, all over the world, to millions of people. And what does it mean? Does it mean that the one awaited by all the world's religions has returned or not, right? And then, of course, and this is the most important thing, we take a look at the single biggest priority that humanity must tackle. Now, Maitreya says that the single biggest thing that humanity must do is we must create peace. It's very important. Now, even if you don't believe in what I'm saying about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, it doesn't matter. The most important thing to take from these videos is to really look at how can you personally help create peace around the world. And it starts with the principle of sharing. Now, Maitreya puts it very simply. He says, without sharing, there can be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. Without peace, there could be no future for humanity. So, we must all look at creating peace as our own survival depends upon it, because according to the masters, there will not be a future if we do not create peace. Now, I'm always of the opinion that, why not try sharing and just see if it works? If it doesn't work, well then shoot, we can go back to beating the crap out of each other and see if that creates peace. But the principle of sharing is really done on a national and an international level. According to Maitreya, every single country has excesses of something that it doesn't use, that usually goes bad, that it can give freely to other countries, and it can take excesses that another country might not be using, going bad, and use it for themselves. So each country has excesses, and of course each country has needs for its people. That is the basic start to the principle of sharing. And then, of course, the principle of sharing will take a whole new look as time goes on, but that's the initial thing. And that will bring about trust among the nations. It will ease the tensions among the nations, of course, and then the people's needs will start to be met, and then justice will reign on the planet, of course, which will bring about peace. Now, it's not an overnight event, but it will definitely help bring about peace in the long term. And what could happen overnight is through the principle of sharing, is we could eradicate hunger on the planet, which is, of course, a major crime. Now, this video is slightly different than a video that I normally put up, where I just answer questions and then get on into reading one of Benjamin Creme's Master's article. And this video, I actually have invited a friend of mine who I've known for 20 years or so to come on the show and give her experiences, because she's had a lot of master experiences, dream experiences where she's seen him in public, and a very fascinating light image of the Master Jesus, which the image on the background of the video will change as we're starting to go through the interview, and then you can actually see this image for yourself. So you have to kind of unfocus your eyes and kind of look at some of it, and it looks like a face. And according to Benjamin Creme's master, that is the face of the Master Jesus. So let's get on into the interview.
I gave a brief introduction to who this lovely lady is, Betsy Whitfield from Dallas, Texas. I've known Betsy since the mid-90s, probably, and has been very active in getting this information out to the general public in her own way for years and years and years. And she has a very unique way of doing it, because she keeps it real and she speaks from the heart. So isn't out lecturing people in the elevators and so forth, are you, Betsy?
No, no.
cornering people at your local bookstore and won't let them leave until they hear the whole story.
That's right. But when people often say, well, so what do you do? And I say, you don't want to know.
All right, well, let's get on into it. I do have to say this for the record. I was reading out your bio, and we laughed about it earlier on the phone call here, but you've done a lot. You're very educated, and your husband is an internal medicine doctor, But the thing that I think is the most telling is you hung out bookstores between carpool runs. So I think that's hilarious. So, and there's a lot to that because you were multitasking about this. You found this information. I'm sure. Did you find it at the bookstore? Is that how you found Benjamin Creme's book?
It was there. It was the only book there. I don't know how I found it. I just used to hang out in the New Age section. Mm-hmm. And Benjamin Creme told me later, he said, well, we have spent a fortune getting that book to fall out of the cabinet so that you could find it.
How much money did you spend doing that? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Now, you've known Benjamin Creme for, before he passed away, for what, 30 years
85,
probably?
85. Yeah, I met him. Yeah.
And how many times did you meet with him and talk with him and spend time with him and so forth?
Yeah, I met him first at a lecture he was giving. He came to America twice a year for over 30 years, and mm-hmm. he always went to Southern California. And so I met him at this. I didn't meet him at the lecture. I met him at the transmission meditation that they held the next day. And, I found him to be very level-headed, very normal, very circumspect, and totally, for me, totally engaging, of course, very knowledgeable. He was a lovely man. We had him here in Dallas for lectures maybe 4 or 5 times in the 90s, late 80s and 90s. And we had him here at the house, and he was such an easy guest considering the commotion he always stirred whenever, we would have, after the lecture, we would invite some people over, and they besieged him with questions and what have you. And he was so very normal in his responses. So altogether, he was just a wonderful human being who had this task. And he was very workmanlike as he went along this path of telling the world about the reappearance. So.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That is true. I found him to be a delightful person, too. But he could also be a tough cookie, that's for sure.
Oh, yes. He could come down pretty hard. I know one time at the conference, they always had a table of snacks in the snack room. And one time I was out there, I thought it'd be helpful and, work in the snack room. And he came after me and he said, "Don't do this. Get back in there into the meditation." And I was just really surprised at the strength of his order. Yeah,
I didn't find it at the time, but I definitely think I consider myself fortunate to have had my butt whipped by him many times.
Yeah.
So, looking back on it, I've learned a lot from him in that way. He was but he was a sweet guy overall, though, that's for sure. Very funny, too.
Yes, but I think that was part of his usefulness as far mm-hmm. as his work is concerned, is that he didn't suffer fools gladly, and he was very strong in his approach to things.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's steer back on to you a little bit. What brought you to this information? You found a book, but what was it about that book that inspired you to buy it and to read it? And how long did it take for you to really get engaged in this information and so forth?
Right. Well, it started with emergency surgery in about 1981 mm-hmm. over Christmas. It was New Year's Eve. We had an ice storm. The lights were out in the hospital except for the emergency lights, and I was in pain having had this surgery. And I said, "God, if you get me out of here, I'll do anything you ask." And so then a couple of years later, I found the reappearance book, and I read it. I thought, oh my gosh, this is really something. But if I'm going to go out on a limb with this, I'm going to need some personal proof because nothing in Dallas was up to this, this information.
Sure.
And so I then had a dream, and in this dream, I was keeping a dream journal at the time. I was getting monographs from the Rosicrucians. I was doing Yogananda. I was doing all kinds of spiritual paths, just kind of sampling everything. And part of the process was to keep a dream journal. So I had this dream one morning, and I was standing at a broad beach, and I look to my left, and I see this small Cessna plane, and around it were standing these men, all had robes on, but there was one who was tall, and he had a blue headdress on. And that man came to me and said, would I do the heart-to-heart for my village? And I said, sure, happy to do it. And so I wrote it down in my book. And shortly thereafter, I started having this amazing feeling of fullness. I don't use the word pregnant because that's something else, but this was a fullness in my body that it wasn't uncomfortable, but it was there and I couldn't ignore it. And so I, went along with life, and I then was reading the reappearance book, and I thought, well, I'm going to go to a lecture, and Ben was going to be in Santa Monica for a lecture that summer. So you have to realize that I was a doctor's wife and a carpooler before all this. So when I announced at the dinner table to my husband that I was going to California to see Benjamin Creme, this was at the time that the Beatles were going to India, and all of that was going on. My husband stood up and he said, "But what about the children?" It was a terrible shock for him. But he relented, and I went out to Santa Monica and went. St. Michael's by the Sea is the church out there, and Terra Center at the time, the LA group, had arranged his talk at this church. So it was packed. Everybody was just sitting there calmly, and Ben walked up and he went up to it was kind of a stage area, and he sat down on a chair and proceeded to go eye to everyone in the audience. And I learned later this is what he always did at his lectures. So I'm sitting there, and his eyes came to me, and all of a sudden he disappeared, and this face, which was the man in my dream, looked at me and nodded, and the next thing I knew, the tears were coming down out of my eyes. My cheeks hurt from grinning so hard. And I had to move my head behind the woman in front of me to kind of rest an eye. The light was so bright and piercing. And it seemed to me it went on for way too long. So I just mentally thought, my goodness, could you please go on to someone else, because I was just weeping there. It was just very embarrassing. And so again, the face, as I learned, was Maitreya, nodded, and he went on to various other people in the audience. So I don't think my experience was unique at that time, certainly. And so that to me was proof that this request, doing the heart-to-heart for my village, was legitimate. And the next night they held a public transmission meditation, which was par for the course in those days. And I was sitting next to Benjamin Creme, and I heard Maitreya's voice clear as a bell. I'd never heard anything in my head before. And and his voice said, "Would you be a handmaiden to the Lord?" Of course, I said, "Of course, yes, of course, I'll do it." I don't really tell too many people that because the word handmaiden has a bad connotation, but it was I think typical of the masters talking back in those days, especially because they weren't used to communicating in the vernacular. And so basically, the question was, would I work for him? And that is what I've done. So I came home and started to create a Benjamin Creme lecture in Dallas, which we did, 4 or 5 times. And it was interesting. Every time Ben would come here, and I think this was true elsewhere too, I would get letters and pictures that people would draw of UFOs. They would say, they sent these pictures of triangles, and they would say, "This floated over my house. Does this have anything to do with the Benjamin Creme lecture?" So I asked Creme about it, and he said at that time, no, it didn't. I think it did, but I don't think Creme wanted to overload the public with too many phenomena. But that occurred. Also, when he would come, there would be reports of a hitchhiker on the highways who would come, would flag down a car and somebody would stop and pick him up, and he would sit in the back seat, and as they were driving along, he would announce the return of the Christ. And typically the poor driver would stop the car and look back, and he was gone. There was no one there. So this has been reported in numerous cities back at that time. I myself heard about it and called the police, because the police would come to see this car parked at the side of the road, and the driver was in another world, so to speak, just totally dumbfounded. And the driver would tell the police what his experience was. And the police would not tell me anything. They said they don't give out that kind of information, but they did agree that there were hitchhiker stories coming in.
Wow.
Yeah. It was great fun. And so we did that for years and years. And during that time, I had a experience here at the house where I was just walking. This was in just before the invasion of Iraq, I think. Mm-hmm. It was late June or early July, very early July. I was walking down my stairs, and I happened to look up on one side of the wall, and there was, it seemed to me, maybe a face on the wall. For heaven's sakes, no. So I continued down the stairs, but, something made me think I should go back and check again. And I looked at it, and it sure did look like a face. So I called my husband. I didn't tell him anything, but I just said, "Would you come here and have a look at this, see what you think?" And he immediately thought it was a face, and that he thought it looked like Rembrandt. So, that was a little bit of proof that somebody else had interpreted it. And so that year, when we went to the annual Transmission Meditation Conference with Benjamin Creme, I took a picture of it and asked him, was this Maitreya or the Master Jesus? And, of course, they both worked together so closely. It could be either one. So he asked his master, and he told me, yes, this was the Master Jesus. And so I said, well, so what am I supposed to do with this? And he said, well, tell the world, publicize it, put it out there as part of the reappearance.
Now, I want to say, too, that the image in the background of the video is going to be the the image that you're referring to. So you can see the face. It's kind of looks like it's to the side a little bit, doesn't it? Is it taken from the side, or how?
Well, one of those is from the front, and then there's a darker image that's a video. And I tried to walk. If you click on the video, I walk from one side to the other, so that's why it may look like it's from the side.
Gotcha. And this was which Iraq invasion was this? The
first in 2003.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it's still there, It's every night when we put the front spotlight on, there it is. And originally it was at Christmas time, I think just before that July, that Christmas, that my husband put the spotlight on the door, which was way, way too bright. But he had been ill, and I didn't want to upset him, so I left it there. And I think, if he hadn't insisted on putting that light on there, we never would have seen this. So it's still there every evening, and whenever we have the timer on, it's there. And many people have come and looked at it, and they get a tremendous feeling of love when they look at it. So it's been really good.
Miracles are everywhere, aren't they?
I know.
Amazing. Disappearing hitchhikers. I mean, that would. Hopefully, they weren't driving too fast.
I hope not. I know, it's just amazing. But when they happen continually, it helps to kind of you realize. More of the context becomes much wider. I think when a miracle happens once or even maybe twice, a lot of people just forget about it. They don't ever take it in. But when these things happen over and over again, you really begin to think about what they mean and to follow the breadcrumbs, if you will, and do some research on it. But then, I took care of both my parents for over 20 years when they were really old, and my mother had broken her foot, and I'd taken her to the hospital, to the doctor's office to have a cast put on, and it was a big purple cast, and she was in a wheelchair. And I brought her down to the foyer there and left her in the foyer, and I went to get the car. And as I was coming around to where the door to the foyer was, I look, and my mother has gotten out of the foyer, and she is about to go down maybe a 30% grade hill that was right there. Mm-hmm. And a woman ran to her and grabbed her wheelchair. It must have taken quite a bit of energy to stop that wheelchair because my mother was already, going down the hill. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't believe it. I was terrified, of course, for my mother. So when the woman brought her back and placed her near my car, I got my mother into the car, put the wheelchair in the trunk, and I grabbed this woman's hand and I said, "Thank you so much." There was nothing to her hand, nothing. It was so frail. And I must say, she wore ballet slippers, a pair of black tights, a giant boyfriend white shirt with the collar up, and she had on a blue turban, and she had these lips that were, when I was in grade school, I had a teacher who fascinated me because her lipstick and her nail polish matched every day, and her lips were these perfect large lips and this woman had the same lips. And I looked at them and I thought, well, those are gorgeous lips. Anyway, I jumped in the car And you had to drive around a circle, and as I was driving around the circle, I looked back to where the woman was standing, and she was hopping up and down, waving her hands and blowing kisses at me. So I, of course, blew some kisses back, and I wrote to Benjamin Creme again, and he asked his master, and the master said, yes, that was Maitreya.
You hear the whole time, I keep telling everybody to look for the eyes. The eyes are the tell that it's Maitreya. You know what I mean? The eyes of Maitreya.
Yes.
You're saying it's the lips of Maitreya.
Well, that was a little special psychological hook for me because, like I say, in the 5th grade, I could not get over this teacher, and I would look for her nail polish and her lips matching every day. But yes, you do look at the eyes.
The ballet slippers, huh?
And the ballet slippers, I know.
Wow.
And she was so frail. How could she stop a wheelchair pulling maybe 2 Gs already? But then there was, and I don't know if everybody's bored of this, but there were a couple of other things.
Tell me.
We in the Dallas group were having our usual lectures at a local bookstore about the reappearance and transmission meditation. And on this particular occasion, as we were setting up, and the bookstore was full of people, and we were in a little community room that was open to the bookstore. But there came this man in, he was so cute. He had on jeans that were had a pleat down the front, were ironed, like iron jeans. Mm-hmm. He had on a plaid shirt that was absolutely right out of the box. You could still see the folds on it. And he wore a summer Mexican hat. And I looked in his eyes, and there was fire in there. Fire in there. And what he did was he walked up and down the store with a book in his hand as if he were a barker at a show or the circus, Mm-hmm. He marched up and down, and nobody saw him, I don't think. I didn't appear that he disturbed anybody. But that, again, was Maitreya. Mm. But when I looked in his eyes, it was like looking into a furnace, which I thought was very, very interesting.
Now, also, too, we were talking about this the other day on the phone, about a Master Jesus experience that you and some friends of yours who know this information had on a plane out to San Francisco to see Benjamin Creme. Yeah. Would you care to share that at all?
Sure. Yeah, that was very interesting. There were 5 of us. We were on an American Airlines plane going to the conference from Dallas, and behind me and in the window seat was a young man. I was behind him when we were loading, so he had on a backpack, and the zipper on the backpack had a big image on it of the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary on his backpack. And he was wearing Bermuda shorts, and he looked very California-esque. And so he sat in a window seat. I was in the window seat in front, and one of our people, Cynthia, was next to him. Mm-hmm. As we did in those days, she started a conversation. I could hear all this. A conversation with him about Maitreya, and she went through the whole, the story and everything. He said, yes, yes, yes. And then she said, I'm very upset at George Bush, our president, who has taken us to war. And she said, I'm just very angry with him. And the man sitting next to her was just very gentle. He explained to her that if you're angry at someone, you cause resistance. But if you send and surround that person with love, there is no resistance to the love, and they will actually change, which we thought was very, very interesting because, things were a little tense back then at the beginning of that war. And she still remembers that today. And she said, I learned then that if you send love to everyone, they feel that they are supported, and then they become more of their real selves because they feel they are accepted. So it was a wonderful repartee that they were having back there. But then I heard him say, well, you all are going to have a long weekend, so I think you should take a nap. And we all did. The next thing we knew, we were there. We were landing, and he said, I'm meditating now, just as we were landing at San Francisco. I'm meditating now, and he was very strongly meditating. And when the pilot touched ground, he said, he nailed it. So I wondered about that airplane is what I was wondering. I thought, my gosh. So we learned a lesson and had a happy trip.
Have you taken his advice?
Yes, I have, and I didn't do it consciously even. That concept is so beautiful, and it works. And it's easy if you just choose your response mechanism. It's true that people, and I think it has to do with heart-to-heart talking. If you talk to people out of your heart, they respond in the most lovely way.
Mm-hmm. Now, who was the person that was talking to Cynthia?
That was Maitreya.
That was Maitreya?
Yeah.
And he had the image of the Virgin Mary on his backpack. It's funny.
Yes, at the end of that zipper was this big blue Virgin Mary, the typical Virgin Mary.
I jokingly have said in the past, about the Master Jesus. He's the only master that I know of whose mother is still, he's working with his mother, so he's got his mother to deal with, right? Poor guy, and apparently she's gender confused because she's actually a male like all the other masters, at the moment in time. So my God, he's pretty dysfunctional as a child, I don't know,
what do you say, Mom, or what?
Exactly. It's we all know who know about the masters, know that, the roles in reincarnation change and so forth, right? So you got to be detached. Your mother could be your sister in your next life or your child. You just never know.
That does change everything if you think about it.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I would love to be able to spank my mom and dad in the future. That would be fun. Get them back.
Oh, I think you'll be able to. Yes.
Yeah, my mom used to pull out that wooden spoon from time to time and smack me.
Oh,
but no, she's a lovely lady. She wouldn't want me talking about that. But that's interesting. I was going to say I'd forgotten about this, but I remember seeing Maitreya as a hitchhiker a couple times. But this one time that I saw him, he was so excited on the side of the road. He was waving people in, and I remember him looking at me. And he was like hit his right arm, and he was like somebody trying to get somebody to. They do it when they have events and somebody's trying to motion you into the parking spot. Yeah. But he was just, it was like so excited, right? He actually stopped 3 cars on the side of. Have you ever seen a hitchhiker stop 3 cars?
Never.
I mean, and it was funny because he had long hair and he was in a Navy outfit set for the summertime in the winter. So he was wearing all white, in their summer dress in wintertime.
Yeah.
And he had the little petticoat on, and he was waving everybody in. And I stopped. I was the last one to stop, so I was the last one in line. He got in the first car and drove away, and I was like, that is so strange. Right?
Yeah, who was that guy?
Exactly. Who can stop 3 cars on the side of the interstate? You know what I mean?
I agree.
He and I'm sure you know this too. People always refer to him as the Maitreya, like it's a title, right?
Yeah.
And I said, no, that's his name, and it means happy one. And I said, if you know what I know about Maitreya, he fits his name for sure. I mean, it's like every time I've seen him, it's like somebody that just scratched off the winning lottery ticket and the scratch-off ticket, and like, oh my God, I can't believe I just won, right? But he always said, the one thing that the one Maitreya line that he said was there was a video that was played at the conference. if you remember when he was in Hyde Park in London.
Yes.
And he said, keep your eyes on the prize, and the prize is humanity, right?
I use that, yes.
But that's his excitement, is the humanity in all of us, right? I mean, that's the love. And he said he wouldn't change the voice of the people or whatever it was for £1 million, you know. But yes, every time I've seen him, he's always been extremely, extremely excited about whatever. I don't know.
I know, and to me, he's a kind of an anchor in the chaos that we live in. Just to know that the prize is humanity, and that we've got to keep our humanity. We cannot lose that. It's so important, and that's the way I'm just so grateful. I've been able to understand all this, especially now. It's tough sledding for so many people. That many times they may not believe what I'm telling them, but they respond to the hopefulness of it all, that it will work out. Things will work themselves out, and humanity will move into its great future.
So let me switch it to a more of an international question, but where do you think, the questions that people ask all the time about, you know, they haven't seen Maitreya on TV, or they haven't, and I've always posed the question that you might have and just not recognized him, right?
Yeah.
And when do you think humanity is going to wake up to the fact that we have to start creating peace, or we're going to not be here much longer? Looking at it, what do you think is going to happen? And in the meantime, I mean, I want to kind of get your opinion on that too, if you don't mind me going in that direction. Sure.
Yeah. Well, you know, back in 30 years ago, when I would read Master's message about hurry, you've got to serve, you have to organize your life. This is important, and you have to hurry. And he would describe the great future for humanity, and I would think, well, you know, what's the hurry? Everything is more or less fine if you really think about it in a suburban sort of way.
Sort of way.
Yeah. And I wondered, how do we get there from here? How do we get to this amazing future where the cities need to be rebuilt? This is what strikes me now, because think of all the cities that are starting to need to be rebuilt after really a fair amount of devastation that is going on now, not to mention the conditions in the cities. So I think people are, because of so many things that have happened just this year, I think people are trying to fall back on, find some footing, and if they would just understand that Maitreya and the Masters are here, that this is not a unique situation. It happens at the beginning of every age, that we are in a new age, and that's why we have the chaos we have. But that if people would simply listen and be open to this story, they would realize they have to invite him. He can't just appear and sprinkle wiffle dust all over us and everything is lovely. We have to rebuild our world based on these ideals of compassion and brotherhood and love and sharing resources. So that's why I think it's so important for people just to hear the story, and then they take it from there. But knowing that people cannot be passive at this time, and maybe hearing that so many other solutions have been tried and they've all failed, that sharing resources is, as Maitreya says, the only way forward. But it's been distorted by many to reference old ideologies that have never worked anywhere, but that the story of love, the spiritual unity of man, has to underlie any future rebuilding. And that's where our information and the people who put out the information do their best work is to try and substand any improvements in the world over this need for love and humanity and brotherhood. As Maitreya says, the law is love.
Mm-hmm. The law is love.
And the truth is brotherhood.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
But Betsy, thank you so very much for your time. You're very generous telling all those stories. I would love to have you come back and talk some more.
Anytime, Gary.
Anytime?
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, listen, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
All right,
Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.